So here's what went down today. One of the most closely watched parole hearings in a long time for a man named Henry Montgomery, who was just 17 years old when he was convicted of shooting and killing a sheriff's deputy back in 1963 and was sentenced to life without parole. He spent the last 58 years in prison, even as his name became linked to that debate that went all the way to the Supreme Court about whether juveniles sentenced to life should get a second chance. He's been denied parole before, most recently back in 2019, and that's when Lester Holt spoke with him about what he expected next.
I mean, you're here for murder. Are you still a danger to society?
No, I'm not. I ain't the same 17-year-old that pulled off that murder charge.
Lester Holt is with us now. Lester, thank you so much for being on tonight. How are you?
Of course, I'm good. Thanks, Allie.
So let me talk to you about Mr. Montgomery here. This is a story that you've been covering for years, as we talked about here. And the parole board in Louisiana actually rejected his parole twice before. What do you think was different this time?
You know, it's a little unclear. We were there for the last hearing, and the issue that was raised was that he had not completed enough programs in prison, education programs or other enrichment things. Of course, many would argue those things weren't available for a lot of the time that he was in prison. Angola was a notorious prison, still is to some extent, but it was, in fact, one of the most violent prisons in the country for a very long time. So the idea that he wasn't able to take programs didn't really hit on the money.
And in fact, it was hugely controversial, right, when that decision happened. So how do you see this decision, the idea that he is now being allowed out on parole? How do you see that changing things? What's the broader significance of that as somebody who has covered justice for all, as we call it, on nightly news for a long time?
Well, two things. First of all, the daughter of the victim, who was a sheriff's deputy in Louisiana, did appear today, opposed this release. But a lot of things have happened. I mean, basically, the whole deal with Mr. Montgomery is there is a landmark Supreme Court decision in his name, Montgomery versus the state of Louisiana, about this issue of whether you could sentence a juvenile to life in prison with no possibility of parole. So that opened up the door suddenly to a lot of folks in prisons who could come forward and say, look, I didn't get a chance at parole. I'd like that. And many have been released. But the man who this was written around was not able to avail himself of that until now, when that panel today freed him, and he left just a short time ago.
And I know we were with him. Our team was with him as he was walking out. What is next for Henry Montgomery? What does he do now with the years in his life?
Well, believe it or not, there is a group that was founded by many of them juvenile lifers, which is what they call these individuals, and they are welcoming him. In fact, many of them were in the hearing today to support him. They look at him as kind of their shining star, as someone who really opened the way for many of these folks who had been, sentenced to life with no parole to finally get parole. So he will be in good hands. The experience of others, though, it's a learning thing. Imagine 58 years cut off from society. The things you don't know are immense, and so he will have to learn, things like how to handle a bank account in the modern era to using a cell phone.
Lester Holt, it is an incredible story, and we're so glad to have you with us to report it out here tonight. Thank you, Lester. Appreciate it.
You get it. Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.